Hello, everyone. My name is Sejan Stephen Park with LA County Library, and I welcome you to Life Skills for Emerging Adults, Healthy Relationships. This series is supported in part by the U.S. Institute of Museum and Library Services under the provisions of the Library Services and Technology Act, administered in California by the State Librarian. This is part of a series of programs for LA County Library focusing on helpful life skill topics for emerging adults, ages 18 to 25. Along with a series of virtual events, we're also offering in-person events on these topics at branches in Lancaster, San Fernando, Compton, South Whittier, and East LA. You can find more information and register on our website at visit.lacounty.org. All right, now it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today, Ms. Rachel Ford. Ms. Ford is a licensed clinical social worker in LA County with her master's degree in social work from Cal State Long Beach. She has over 13 years of experience in social work, counseling, and emotional healing with a focus on serving the emerging adults and transitional age youth community. Thank you, Ms. Ford, and the floor is yours.
Hello, good evening. First of all, I just want to thank all of you for being willing to spend the next hour with me. I always appreciate people that are willing to grow and develop their skills. And I just think this is such a special time, and you guys are at such a unique age in your life and you're busy, right? So I appreciate you taking this hour to spend with me. And I hope tonight's going to be fun. I hope that you're going to get something out of it. What I want is for us to have conversation. And I know that's a little hard with you're muted and your videos are off, but please throughout this, feel free to ask questions. We're here to grow and explore ourselves. And we're going to be talking about something that pertains to all of us in so many different ways, and that's healthy relationships. So hopefully this will spark questions from you guys. I'm happy at any point, just post a question and I'll stop and answer it. And if we digress, we digress. But really, this is for you guys tonight. All right. So the topic of healthy relationships. Why is this important? Because we're all in relationships in our life. We're in relationships with others, and we're in relationship with ourselves. So I just have always thought that it's bananas that we don't take a course on relationships in high school, right? It's one of those life skills that pertains to us in so many different ways. And no one really talks about how to be in relationships and what are some of the ways and what characteristics do I have to bring to relationships, right? Or how am I blocking some relationships from actually happening in my life? So we're going to get to cover all of that tonight. But just some interesting facts, because I always think it's fun to start with facts. Just wondering if you guys think it's true or false that just like food, water, social connection is vital to our overall well-being, right? Do you guys think that that's true? Because it absolutely is, right? The need for connection and relationships as human beings, we are wired for that. And, all of us just went through this global pandemic, and we kind of had a real sense of what it's like to be isolated, right? And what it's like to not have the connection that we're used to. And I think it's fair to say that all of us felt that in some way, right? For some, the impact was bigger than others, but definitely we experienced, more isolation than we're used to. And even just in general, before that even happened, they say that 3 out of 5 Americans are lonely. And so if we think about that, and what that means is there's difference between being lonely and being alone, right? Some of us are wired, we like to be alone. We like our alone time. But being lonely is different than that, right? Being lonely is feeling like I don't have someone to call when I'm having a hard time, right? Or I don't have a group of people to go out with. I don't have a social group or a community that I can bond and be connected with. And so if you think of that, 3 out of every 5 people is dealing with that on an ongoing basis. That's a large number of people. So just something to keep in mind kind of as we start talking about this stuff. And if you identify with that, hopefully some things that we talk about tonight can support you in kind of taking next steps to look at that and kind of shift that for you. I'm sure you guys understand this one. The strongest friendships are formulated from the ages of 18 to 26. So the years that you guys are at, these are really where the most strong friendships develop. And I'm sure you have guesses of why that is. And a lot of it is because these are really such formative years of your life. Regardless of if you're working or going to school or just kind of trying to figure out what's next, you are meeting different people in these crucial parts of your life that, research says like you will take these people because they are so influential to you during these formative years. Those really form the friendships, right? So when we go through significant life events with people, that really forms connection. So if you haven't found that group, just know like you are in the right age frame to really start formulating those lifelong friendships. And at least 27% of Americans are estranged from a member of their own family. And research suggests that about 40% of Americans have experienced estrangement at some point. And why I threw this stat in there is because I do think it's important when we talk about relationships to look at our relationships with our family, and whether that's a sibling or a cousin or a grandparent or our parents, those relationships are sometimes the hardest to navigate. And again, I don't think that our families or those around us, the adults in our lives, do that good of a job about talking about the struggles that happen within family connections, right? And sometimes we feel obligations, or we feel like it's hard to set boundaries. All of that stuff that comes up in relationships absolutely comes up in our family. So it's interesting that so many of us kind of struggle with that relationship in general. And then I'm sure this doesn't surprise you either, that 3.8 billion people worldwide use social media to form relationships and connections, right? So things have really shifted, and really we are using online platforms as a way to meet new people, form connections, find groups that, have similar interests in us. And that really is a platform that we're using. And so we also get to look at that and say, how does that change relationships, right? How does that change the way that we communicate in relationships? Because it definitely does. And I think we would be neglecting a big part of relationships if we didn't talk about that. All right. And like I said, any questions at any point, feel free to interrupt me. Let's see. Sorry, guys. It won't let me. There we go. Okay. So if you think about how much time and energy you spend in relationships, if we think about all the different people that we're in relationships with, what comes up for you? Because there's our coworkers, right? And then there's our siblings, there's our friends, there's our partners and people that we're in relationship with, there's coaches, roommates, right? That's a big one. A lot of us, unfortunately or fortunately, can't afford to live on our own. And so we are sharing spaces with roommates, and maybe for the first time, maybe not, but it is definitely an interesting dynamic navigating a relationship and a roommate, because either way, I think that there's challenges, right? If they're your friend, I think we all know, like, we have those friends that we like, but we definitely can't live with. Like, we just don't do well living with them. And then we have those people that we don't know at all. And so we're trying to navigate living with someone that we don't know anything about, or, their habits, if they're messy, if they're clean, if they cook and all of that. And so I do believe that roommates are a big relationship, especially at this age in your life, that we get to figure out how to navigate. Said friends, family, teachers, coaches, and then online friends, right? So really, my point in showing you this list is that we have relationships with so many people, and one thing or one person, I guess, that's not on this list is ourselves. And I really do believe that in order to learn how to navigate relationships with other people, we really have to take a look at ourselves and say, okay, what do I bring to the table, right? What is it with me? What are things that I gravitate towards that, when I become friends with someone, or when I'm talking to my teacher, what kind of things are innately in me that might, help that and support that relationship, or might block it? And there is no right or wrong. I really want you guys to understand that there's no right way to be in relationship. There's just healthier ways, right? And I think if we're really honest, we all are working towards being healthier versions of ourselves. And understanding ourselves is one of the best ways to do that. So that's where we're going to start this conversation tonight. Okay. Okay, here we go. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of your communication style, right? So there's this theory that we all have a different communication style. So the way that we gravitate towards or tend to communicate when we're talking to others. And so there's really 3 different styles. And passive, if you're a passive communicator, what that means is that you really don't express your needs and wants that easily, right? So this would be the person that's like, where do you want to go for dinner? And you're like, I don't care, you pick. Or, you know, what do you want to do tonight? I don't care. Or how are you feeling? I'm fine, right? So when we tend towards, if we're a passive communicator, we really just kind of aren't comfortable sharing our needs and wants, right? Or telling people what we need in relationships. And why this is important is because if we know that we tend to be passive in the way that we communicate, we get to be aware, right, that there's a chance that who's going to be drawn to us are people that are more dominant, right, or more aggressive, or you know, make all the decisions for us. And again, why I want to talk to you guys about this, because if you're in a relationship and you know that you are passive, you know, are we getting our needs met in that relationship, right? And so we want to work towards, if we tend to be passive, what we want to do is want to work towards finding relationships that we can slowly start expressing our needs, right? Saying, actually, I really love Chinese food tonight. Actually, you know, I really didn't want to go see that movie. I wanted to see this movie. And so it's these little steps that we can take to start feeling comfortable expressing the things that we want. So that's one style of communication. The next style, and I would love for you guys to either identify this in yourself or in someone that you know, because it clicks way more when we put like a connection to it. We have the aggressive style of communication. So these people, you know who they are. They're dominant. They kind of speak in a loud tone. They share what they want. They kind of override other people's opinions. They're the ones that are like, this is what we're doing. They make the plans. And not that it's always in a bully way, but they are just very dominant, right? So their opinion gets heard. You know, their needs get met because they're putting them out there in kind of aggressive way. So if you tend to gravitate towards this, the area that you get to notice is, where am I allowing other people in my life, other relationships in my life to have space, right? If I'm in a relationship with someone, am I always, you know, dominating what we do? Am I always dictating where we eat? Am I always doing all these things? And am I making room for that other person to have a voice and a choice, right? Because relationships really are both ways. And both people, it is important that both people feel heard and seen. And if you are, you know, an aggressive communicator, just notice how people start to respond to you, right? Are people empathetic? Do they respond positively? Are they kind of avoidant of you? And again, this is just kind of to notice, how do we show up? How am I in relationships? And is there space for growth there? And then the third one, which we're kind of all working towards being, is just assertive. And that really means is that we're able to say what we want and what we need in a way that feels loving and kind and takes into consideration other people's opinions. But we're confident in that, right? And so the difference is we're not always bullying and we're not always giving in, but we really are compromising. And so when we get to a place of assertive communication, we can take in what other people are saying, take that into consideration. So, you know what, like, I hear that you want to go see this movie tonight. I was so looking forward to seeing this one. Would it be okay if we did that? And so that's what it sounds like, and that's what it feels like. And you can tell just in the difference of saying it that way, that other person is going to feel seen and heard, right? Like maybe you don't, it's not that you're giving into them, but you're just saying, you know what, like I was so looking forward to this. Is it okay if we go do that? And a lot of times that's going to be received in a much healthier way, especially when it comes to relationships. Okay. Any questions there? Are we feeling okay? I don't want to just throw information at you, but I want you guys to kind of just notice like, do I tend to communicate this way, right? What people in my life might tend to communicate with me this way? So even just like making mental check marks. All right.
Rachel, one question we got. Yeah, someone asked, will these slides be available to those attending the webinar? So I just want to say yes. Any of these slides, all of these slides will send to all you folks here that are attending and registered.
Yes, perfect. And I have resources for you guys at the end too, where you can get more information about all of this stuff. Okay, so that's one theory, is the theory that we all kind of tend to communicate in these kind of different ways. And we're all working towards, or hopefully some of us don't do the work, right? But a lot of us are working towards being more assertive in our communication. The other thing that I want to introduce to you guys is love languages. And maybe you have heard of this already. They're kind of all over the place, but the idea that we each have a specific love language that is how we express love, right? And before I go through them, I want to explain to you why this is important. So I can tell you my love language is time. And so that means that how I feel loved and how I show love is by giving people time, right? So showing up and sitting with them and, just being in their presence, that's how I show love. Now, my husband, right, if he has a different love language than me, I can be showing up and giving him all this time. And if he doesn't have that same love language, he's not necessarily going to feel loved in the same way. And this will make more sense as we go through them. So I'll start to show them to you. So one is acts of service, right? So this really means we enjoy showing up and doing things. So these are the people that come over, you're like, you're just venting, like my sink broke, and they come over and they're just fixing your sink, right? Or they're bringing you dinner when, they're like, hey, I got dinner. I thought you'd be hungry too. I'm bringing you dinner. So these are really, you show love through doing things for other people. Okay. And this is actually mine. So the other one is gifts. And this just doesn't mean like I'm going out and buying everyone gifts all the time, but it's when I do, I am really thoughtful of what that person wants. And so, I'm known for 6 months ago, we walked by this store and my husband was like, oh, that's a really cool watch. And we keep walking. And so for Christmas, I remember that and I go out and get him the watch. And so to me, that's how I show love. I'm like, I know that you liked this thing and I remembered it and I went out and got it for you. So there's a meaning behind the gift. So when I get a gift that has no thoughts in it, that was just like, oh, I picked this up real quick. And I can always tell when that is, my feelings always get a little hurt. I'm like, you didn't think about it, right? There was no effort into it. And that's not because I'm not grateful for the gift, but because my love language is gifts, it doesn't resonate. I have to remind myself, oh, that's my love language. That's not theirs necessarily. So I hope that kind of clarifies why this is important. So quality time. So this is really showing up and spending time with people. So like I gave the example before, if this is yours, you enjoy sitting with people and, you like plans to be with people, you want to spend time with them. And that's really how you show them that you care about them. Physical touch. So this is the people that always want to give you a hug and are leaning on you and might give you a back rub when you didn't ask for it. And so hopefully the people that in your life are really doing that because that's their love language. They're not trying to be all in your space. But that's how they express love. So they're very touchy, they're very huggy. And for someone whose love language isn't physical touch, you could be like, whoa, but also understanding if that's yours, if you're not getting and receiving that, right, it's going to feel, does that person love me? Am I, why aren't they kind of giving me the same love that I'm giving to them? So again, I just would love you guys to identify which one is yours. And then words of affirmation, right? So this is really the compliments, and you're not saying it just to give someone a compliment. You're saying it because that's how you express love. So thank you so much for doing that for me today. That meant so much. Like, I just really appreciate you picking me up, when I didn't have a ride. Like, you are just expressing your love for that person through words. This is one that I think a lot of us aren't good at. Like, I know that I'm always working at being better at giving words of affirmation, just because I don't need it, right? Like, this doesn't really fill my bucket when people say thank you or, comment on something that I do. And so because it doesn't fill me, it's not as natural for me to do it for others. So I think that's the big point with this too, when it comes to relationships, that something that's not natural to us, if that's what someone else in our life needs, we get to work on that, right? We get to be mindful of like, oh yeah, okay, I get to work on spending more time with that person, right? Or doing something for them because I know that makes them feel good. And so this is like two-sided. I think, we get to recognize what ours is, because that's how we're also going to kind of expect to be loved. And then with the people in our life, if you can identify theirs, you're going to be able to speak their love language, which means you're going to be able to do things to them that are going to make them go, that feels really good, right? So your friends, your relationships, all of that. And this is universal. It doesn't matter if you're, what gender you are, what sexuality you are, any of that. Really, these are kind of universal, that research says humans, have kind of gravitate towards one of these love languages. So does that all make sense? I know there's a weird shadow on me, but does that feel helpful? I hope so. Okay. The last thing when we look at ourselves that I want you guys to just consider is attachment styles. And this is huge, huge, huge in relationships. And again, these are all theories. These are all evidence-based theories, which means, they collected a lot of research, they studied a lot of people, and they came up with these theories. It doesn't mean that you're absolutely going to fit into a box or this is your absolute truth. All of this stuff is just information that we can start to go like, okay, I wonder if this is why I do this, right? And I wonder if this is why they do that. So I just want that disclaimer that, like, I'm not trying to put you guys in the box. I'm just really trying to help you understand yourself and the people that you're in relationship with. So attachment styles says that in relationships, right, we gravitate towards one of these attachment ways. And so the theory behind it, I won't bore you, but it's really based on our childhood and our attachment with our caregivers and what that was like, because a lot of that is formulated in our brain before we can even conceptualize what that relationship means. And then as adults, right, we show up in life kind of with that permanent idea of healthy relationships or secure attached relationships. And so I'll explain what this means. So secure attachment is kind of the one that we're all shooting for. That it means that in relationships, we trust our friends or we trust our partners. We feel confident about who we are. We know what we have to offer, right? So it's like, yes, I know that and not in a conceited way, right? But in a way of like, I know that I'm an awesome friend. I know that I show up for people when I need, like, I'm not jealous, or I don't have a lot of FOMO if I'm not invited, or in partnership, right? Like, I trust them with that person. Like, it's about trust and knowing ourselves and being secure in the relationship, right? So this is kind of what we're shooting for, is to be able to be in relationships and feel secure. Another part of that is also that that person supports you in being secure. And if they don't, a secure person would go, you know what? Like, that's not healthy for me. I deserve better. I'm out. So that's what we're shooting for. the avoidant attachment, which I think all of us have tendencies of this, is to really avoid conflict and avoid this. I think we all know these people that like the second that you make a mistake, they're done with you, right? Or people that easily ghost you and just aren't willing to have the hard conversation. So avoidant attachment means, you know what, and really guys, this is a protection factor. Like we do this to protect ourselves from getting hurt. Again, maybe somewhere down the road, we learn that like relationships are scary. If I get too close, that person's going to hurt me. And so we avoid being hurt before they can hurt us. And so if this is like an attachment style that you gravitate towards, I just want you to notice that, right? And again, nothing's wrong with you. You're not broken. This can always be worked on. But if you're the person that's like, hey, I'm always going to push relationships away, whether that's a friendship or an intimate relationship or family, before they can hurt me, there's a good chance that you're sitting in this category of avoidant. And so we start to take small risks, right? Like I'm actually going to give this person another chance, right? Maybe they lied to me just because they didn't want to hurt my feelings, and start to just see if we can inch closer to, you know, like second chances ultimately is what we want to get to. So that's avoidant. We're kind of avoiding any intimacy, any closeness, and again, to protect ourselves. But I think one of the coolest things, and I say this with all honesty, one of the coolest things about being an adult is you can look at the last 18 years of your life and you can say, okay, I can see that maybe I developed some of these protective mechanisms for this part of my life because it kept me safe, right? Or it allowed me to get through this time in my life. And we can appreciate that. And then now that we're an adult, we can say, and there might be a chance that I no longer need that, right? That no longer serves me, that protecting myself from relationships worked, right? And it got me through this time, and maybe it no longer works for me anymore. And so again, like this is such a cool time for you guys, because you can say, hey, maybe I've outgrown this, right? Maybe I don't need to avoid everyone that I want to get close to, because maybe there's something better on the other side of that if I allow myself to get close to people. So again, like this is the time where you can go, okay, that was this chunk of my life, and now there's this chunk of my life, and what I want to carry from my adolescence and my childhood, and what do I want to let go or heal from. And so again, I just think that's the coolest thing about this time of your life, because you get to make that choice. Okay, anxious attachment. So it pretty much is what it sounds like. We don't really feel secure and we're not avoidant, but we're just kind of anxious. So these are the kind of more clingy people. And again, I'm not labeling. I just want you guys to kind of be able to visualize what it could look like. So need reassurance, right? So, hey, how's it going? What are you doing? Did you have fun last night? Did you know, the confirmation of, do you enjoy this relationship as much as I do? Right? So we don't necessarily feel secure in it. So we kind of need that reassurance so that we can, if that makes sense. And then we have disorganized, right? So really it's kind of just like all over the place. Like sometimes we feel secure, sometimes we don't, sometimes we push away, sometimes we pull in close. It just, we really don't have a good sense of who I am in a relationship, and do I trust others in relationship or not? So it just kind of feels like we're all over the place. We're kind of scattered. That's a lot of information. Do we have some questions, Stephen? I see some.
Well, yeah, feel free to put in questions in the Q&A box, folks, but no questions on this particular. Well, actually, here's the first one. This one seems related to what you just said. How do you get out of a unhealthy mindset? And they mentioned trauma bonding as an example. I think you just spoke on that a bit. Yeah.
Okay. That's a whole nother lesson. But again, I think my honest answer, you guys, is understanding what the blocks are that come up for you, right? So if we have experienced any form of trauma when it comes to relationships, our brains are wired to gravitate towards what we know, right? Our brains can't process all the information that we receive on a daily basis. It's just not possible, right? So we store things, we remember things so that when they approach us, we can, oh, I know what to do with this. So really, when we can identify, okay, why am I seeking out this connection, right? Is it because of a shared experience, right? Is it trying to repair something that was broken before? You know, a lot of us get into different forms of relationship because part of our brain thinks, I couldn't repair this one relationship in my life. And maybe, right, I can almost repair this relationship through another relationship. And then we think that we can repair one relationship through another, and that's never going to be true, right? We can't, the only way to repair this relationship is with the person that it happened to. And a lot of times we can't. And so there's healing, acceptance, a lot of things that go into this so that we can just be in this relationship without all this other stuff. Again, there's like so many aspects to that question, but I think the easiest answer is be aware of what shows up for you, right? Be aware of the people, why you are gravitating towards the people that you're gravitating towards. And my favorite question that I always ask myself, and I encourage my clients to ask them, is like, what am I trying to accomplish? And if that's in a relationship, right, what am I trying to accomplish through this relationship? And if my answer is, you know, something healthy, then it's like, okay, awesome. I'm just trying to accomplish connection or bonding or all of that. But if it's, I'm trying to repair something from my past, I'm trying to heal a part of me through this relationship, I'm trying to, you know, whatever it is, if that answer is unhealthy, then we get to look at that, right? And so that question, I use it a lot with anxiety. I know that's like not even part of this, but when I'm going down my anxious spirals, I stop myself and I ask myself, what am I trying to accomplish? And usually the answer is nothing that I can accomplish in this moment, or nothing that I can control, right? A lot of times it's not even in our control. And so that would just be like, if I could give you a piece of advice, when you notice yourself doing certain things or gravitating towards certain behaviors, just ask yourself, what am I trying to accomplish here? And even just being able to recognize it, eventually, right, we're going to make a different choice. But again, our brains kind of gravitate towards, we want what we know. And so if we have something that just stops that, so whether that's a deep breath or a question, we can then access the frontal cortex of our brain, our frontal lobes, and that's what we need to make different choices, if that makes sense. Again, there's a lot to it, but what a great question. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. A bit related to that, another question, Rachel.
Yeah.
So how can I explain that I am disorganized / avoidant to others? So how do you communicate to others about your own style?
I know. I was actually listening to a podcast and they're like, we should all wear like our styles on our chest and be like, okay, this is who I am, you know, and it would be so much easier. You know, I think with so many things in relationships, it's about owning who we are, right? And being able to say like, okay, I'm working on, you know, trusting. Like I gravitate towards, you know, not trusting people, and I'm working on that. So I think the disclaimers are so important, you know, because hopefully that's the truth, right? I think it's one thing to just be like, oh, this is the way I am, take it or leave it. But I think for our entire lives, we are working on being a better version of ourselves. So, you know, if your relationship, and let's just say with your, you know, if you're in an intimate relationship with your partner, being able to say, you know, yeah, I've noticed, or what I've learned about myself is that I'm anxiously attached. And, you know, so like, I'm going to want to know what you're doing and what time you're coming home. And that's going to make me feel safe. So also being able to tell them like, that's what makes me feel safe. And I'm working on that because I also don't want to be that naggy person, right? That's always berating you with, what are you doing? When are you coming home? What's happening? And so to be able to say like, this is who I am right now. And I'm working on that, but how you can make me feel safe in this moment, it's just through communication, right? And coming home when you say you're going to come home. So really like being honest. And I think sometimes that's the hardest part, right? Learning to say, this is a part of me and I'm working on it. And the other part of that is to have a partner that is willing to support you in that, right? Because a lot of times we pick people that confirm our insecure attachments, which just keeps us in the cycle longer. Can you guys see me? The sun is like,
Yeah. Oh,
okay.
to
Sorry.
see. Okay.
Any other
One of the, yeah, on this style, can you give another example of a secure attachment style? That's one question.
Yeah. So again, it's really, I mean, relationships are kind of the easiest examples to give. But you know, it's being okay with them going to a party without you. It's feeling confident that, you know, I'm an awesome person, right? And again, not in a conceited way, but like I have a lot to offer a relationship, and this relationship works, and I trust you in this relationship. And so we believe people that they do what they say they're going to do, that they're, you know, where they say they're going to be, that, you know, they won't cheat on us. And again, I feel like the next question is going to be like, but what if they do? That's a risk that we take regardless of our attachment style, right? And so often I hear, like, I don't want to let my guard down because then if they actually do cheat on me, it's going to hurt more. Or if my worst case scenario happens, it's going to hurt more. And I promise you guys, I have this conversation all the time. That is such a misconception. If our worst thing happens to us, it doesn't hurt any less because we are worried about it or we tried to prevent it from happening. It still sucks that much, right? And so even if we're secure and that happens, it's going to suck as much as if we were insecure and it happens. And so these beliefs that we tell ourselves of like, I can't let my guard down, we take a risk in relationships, and that's a big part of it, right? And when we get closer to knowing what we bring into a relationship and our areas of growth, at the end of the day, we can say, okay, that was that person, right? And we can separate it from ourselves and like, that was that choice that that person made, and not like assume responsibility. And so I just felt like that was going to be the next question, because yeah, in relationships, we risk getting hurt, and we will get hurt, right? But that's part of also like the growth. Like we wouldn't grow in the same way if we didn't get hurt or hurt other people. That's how we learn in life, unfortunately. So yes, there's risk, but there's so much growth that it really, really is worth the risks. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So, okay. I'm not going to show this video because, well, it's not very long. I want to show you guys this. So One Love is an amazing organization. And their mission is really to educate high school and college age students about healthy relationships. And this was formed by a family whose daughter actually died by an ex-partner. So I'm going to show you this little clip because out of this organization, they have done all this research and pulled together all this thing that talk about the 10 signs of healthy and unhealthy relationships. I'm kind of scared to show the video because I'm scared I won't get back, but we'll try and see what happens.
On July 17th, 1987, in Baltimore, Maryland, Yardley Love was born. And right away, she was a force to be reckoned with. From her enormous heart to her contagious smile, you couldn't help but feel joy in Yardley's presence. In 2006, Yardley started college at the University of Virginia, where she played for the women's lacrosse team. 4 short years later, in May 2010, Yardley Love's life came to a shattering halt.
Yardley's former boyfriend forced his way into her apartment and brutally beat her to death. The Baltimore native's body was discovered face down on the bed in her college apartment. The murder sent shockwaves throughout the school. Hundreds gathered to mourn the lacrosse player's death, aware that they sat near the spot on the lawn where Love was supposed to accept her diploma in 3 weeks.
Devastated by the loss of Yardley, her family created One Love, a foundation that educates young people about the difference between healthy and unhealthy relationships so that they may seek help before an abusive relationship escalates to violence.
I love the fact that it keeps Yardley's memory alive in such a positive way. And I love the fact that we hear feedback from so many people that have gotten out of a dangerous relationship because of this. And I honestly feel that we're saving lives.
Because here's the sad truth. Yardley Love was killed and her death was avoidable. If only anyone in her life, including her, understood the visible yet often misunderstood signs of an unhealthy relationship. This is why One Love works to make sure others have the information that Yardley, her friends, and her family did not. Because unfortunately, Yardley's story is more common than most people realize. In fact, more than 1 in 3 women and more than 1 in 4 men will experience relationship violence in his or her lifetime. One Love aims to not only bring awareness to these unacceptable statistics, but to ultimately change them.
Our workshop Escalation is a 90-minute workshop that we're taking to college campuses, and it's focused on educating young people about what relationship abuse is, and then empowering them to make change in their communities. You've just watched this very powerful fictional depiction, and all of a sudden there's this giant reminder that this is very, very real.
The workshop has been so successful since it started on college campuses in 2015 that One Love is now taking it to high schools and communities across the country.
It's really going to spark a conversation on a topic that hasn't been talked about.
One Love also connects with young people online by releasing videos that show what the problem looks like, sounds like, and how easily it can be hidden behind seemingly kind words.
Because I love you.
Skip class with me. Let's stay in bed today.
You were walking with Mark? Because I love you. This Jason number.
Delete.
And Ben.
Delete. That's not love.
Through compelling workshops and emotionally powerful content, One Love has started more than a conversation. It's inspired nationwide partnerships, activated community events, and empowered young people everywhere. What began with one family in one place has spread to an entire country and started a movement. But One Love's work is nowhere near complete. Not until every community across the country is equipped with the tools to step up and speak out. So join One Love, and together let's educate others about the signs of unhealthy relationships so that we can build stronger communities and change lives.
These conversations that we don't have about unhealthy relationships and how they escalate. So they have 10 signs of health, and we're going to run through these because I do want to leave the last couple minutes for more questions, because that's really the fun part. But really, this is what we're looking for in relationships. This is healthy relationships. This is them functioning at their best capacity. And I'm just going to run through them. So a comfortable pace, right? So this means that the relationship is moving in a pace that feels good for both people. So whether that's, like we're talking and then we meet up for coffee and then we, go on a date, whatever that is, that both people are feeling comfortable about that, right? That not one person is pushing to define the relationship one day after it if that's not comfortable with the other person, so that the pace feels comfortable for both people. Honesty is kind of self-explanatory. But I think it's about also being comfortable being honest with that person, right? So can I share that I'm uncomfortable with something, and can I trust that that person's gonna respect that, right? So do I have safety to be honest? It's not just about speaking our truth. It's also about feeling safe to do so. Respect. So we respect each other. We respect each other's bodies. We lift each other up. We're really respectful of each other in that relationship. Kindness, right? We are kind to each other. We're empathetic. We're comforting, we provide support, we kind of give all those things that we would want in a relationship. I'm going to come back to healthy conflict. Fun, I think, is such a big one, that relationships should be fun, that we should be having fun together. We should be laughing. We should be enjoying each other's company. And again, not just intimate relationships, but friendships, right? I don't know. I know I've had those friendships. I'm like, this is a lot of work. This is, and every relationship takes work. Not that any relationship comes easy, but when there's a lack of fun in your relationship, you really get to look at that. Like if we're always fighting, or if there's always conflict, or there's always drama in our friend group, we get to take a look at that. Taking responsibility, right? So that we own when we make mistakes, we take responsibility for things that we don't do right, because we're human. We're not going to get everything right. We're not going to do everything perfectly. And the biggest part is when we take responsibility for that, and vice versa. Trust is, that they're not going to do anything to hurt you or ruin the relationship. Independence, that both people can have lives outside of the friendships or the relationships, and that's okay, right? That's not threatening, that I can go to yoga with this group of friends, and that feels safe. Equality, that both people have equal say in the relationship. And then healthy conflict, right? We could do a whole nother session on communication and conflict and how to handle that. But that, when we do argue, that if we're too heated, we say, I'm gonna take a break. Let's come back to this. And just like a fun tip, you guys, relationship experts say that you should never go more than 48 hours without coming back to the conversation, right? So if I'm having a heated argument and I'm just like, you know what, I need to go for a walk, or I need to come back to this, I can't talk about it right now, that we don't let 48 hours go by without coming back to that. Because for the other person, it's so important to know that you're not just going to leave that hanging, or it's not going to get swept under the rug, that we're going to come back and talk about this in a timely manner where, that we can really repair it. So that's healthy. And unhealthy, so these are just red flags, and I'm going to run through them. Intensity, right? So when someone's emotions towards you feel like really overwhelming or really intense, we kind of saw it in the video, like, where were you? Why did you do that? Or intensity of like, I love you so much, right off the bat. And so when you kind of get that sense of like, this feels really intense, that's kind of a red flag. Manipulation, right? And this happens so often in relationships. The other person manipulates, and usually it's subtle, right? It's like, don't do that. Don't go hang with your friends. Don't you want to be with me tonight? Like, you said you loved me, so why wouldn't you come with me to this party? So it's small acts of manipulation that usually grow over time. Another part of this is like gaslighting, if you guys ever heard that. And so that's like, I didn't do anything wrong, you're just being overly sensitive, right? So when they throw back the responsibility on you, that's another red flag. Sabotage, right? If someone's trying to ruin friendships, ruin a job that you have because they want you to spend more time with them, that's a red flag. If they makes you feel guilty, and this happens a lot in friendships too, right? Like, oh, fine, don't hang out with me tonight. Oh, you want to do that instead? Yeah, I'm going to be lonely, right? Or to be honest, guys, this happens a lot in friendships with mental health, right? That sometimes we, are dependent, someone's dependent on you for their emotional well-being. And that should never be the case, right? We can support people, we can be there for them, but when someone's dependent on us for them, for whatever they're going through, that's not for you to handle, that's for a professional to handle, right? So just kind of noticing when that's showing up. And then obviously some of the big ones, if they're isolating, if they're volatile, right? Kind of like get really angry, intimidating, or if they betray you. And I know betrayal is one that, people go like, can there be forgiveness? Can there be repair? And that's individually up to you. But I can tell you that once trust is broken, it's really, really, really hard to repair that. There has to be active work. So that's, again, a decision for you guys to be made. And deflecting responsibility kind of goes back to the gaslighting. Like, it's not about them. If you did something wrong, you made them feel that way. So I know that was a really quick overview of these. But I do think it's important, right? Because when we can notice these in our relationships, we can put boundaries, or, right, we can say, you know what, this is probably not healthy for me. Or if we're doing this in a relationship, you know, it's one of those things that, like, how can we notice this so that we can act different in the future? So those are theirs. Steven, I think I want to stop. I mean, I could keep going, but if there's questions, I think I'd rather answer those.
Yeah. Let me hop back on. Thank you, Rachel. Oh, thank you, Rachel. That's really, really powerful information. One question here. We had a question about, families. How do you deal with parents who treat you like a child and they dismiss what you want to do? They question your ability to make decisions. It makes you kind of question yourself, creating like an unhealthy dependence in the family dynamic.
Yeah. I'm gonna say it's really tricky being an adult living with your family, right? So if you're, and I'm assuming this person's living with them, I'm not sure. I'll do both scenarios, right? So if you're living with them, there is still that interesting dynamic of being under the roof, right? And their rules, and them kind of still have this pull towards being able to dictate your life. So that is tricky, right? And a lot of times parents also need to make a transition when their kids turn 18, right? So I parented you this way, 0 to 18, and now you're an adult and I need to transition and parent you differently. And a lot of times, or sometimes, that doesn't happen, right? And so being able to say to them, like, whatever it is, like, I know that you want me to go to this college, right? And I know that if I make that decision for myself, I'm going to have more buy-in. I'm going to be more successful, right? And so, like, to be able to, a lot of times communication is about disclaimers, right? I know why this is happening and this is what I need, right? So what I need from you is to bounce different colleges off of you, right? Or, I need a little space to navigate this on my own because I want to have ownership of this conversation. And so there's so many different ways that we can do that, but it is about the communication and the way that we say it. Because a lot of times parents just want to throw advice at us, and we don't even want advice. We just want support, right? So if we say, like, I know that you want to give me advice, but I know that I can figure this out on my own, they're going to be like, oh, okay, right? If we can assure them, like, I got this, like, you raised me well for the last 18 years so that I can make these choices on my own. I know, again, there's a lot of different ways that we can navigate that, but it's tricky. It's tricky when our parents still want to, or anyone, adult in our lives, wants to kind of dominate the choices that we make.
Yeah, thank you. Another question more for friendships. I'm a shy person. The few friends I have moved away. What's the best place to join social groups? How do I find groups that have the same interests?
Mm-hmm. And this is where I do think, like, social media comes into play, right? Because there are so many different social groups on there. I also know, you guys, that, like, there are still a lot of in-person groups too. And so I always tell people, like, I'm a shy person too. It actually takes a ton of energy for me to, like, ramp myself up for something like this. So identify what you enjoy, right? And then start there. So whether that's, I enjoy art, whether I enjoy hiking, right? Find that common denominator and gravitate towards that. There are still a lot of groups that meet in person, even though I know that it feels like they don't. But my best advice to you is find what you like and then move towards that, right? Because you're going to have an instant connection with those people, and it's just going to feel easier, especially if you're shy. You already know you have a common place to start from.
Thank you. A couple of questions here actually on long distance relationships. What would be your advice on long distance relationships? I'm in a long distance friendship, and I potentially have feelings for her. And I think this sounds a little bit like a love line question, but yeah.
Yeah. They're hard, right? I mean, that's like my first response, right? They are really hard because there's, it's hard enough to navigate. Well, and okay, they're hard. And some people really like them, right? Because some people are like, I can do my life over here and then have this relationship over here. But I would actually encourage you to like pursue that interest, right? Because if that's something that you want, then we get to like start to like navigate that. I think a lot of times we sit in unknown for longer than we should or we have to because we're nervous. And I get that sometimes we don't want to ruin the friendship, right? Or sometimes that friendship is more valuable than the way that we feel. That's a choice that you're going to make. But I think also, like, do you know if you're going to see them again, right? Do you know when you're going to be able to connect? Because there is a difference about being with someone in person through being with someone online. The way that they show up, the way that they do life, right? Like all of those things are really big contributors into partnerships and friendships that you just don't know. You know their character, right? You know the person that they are, but the way that they do life, you don't have a sense of. And so, if there's ways to meet up, if there's ways to, visit them or see them, I think that's so crucial because you might really be into them now. And then, right, like you guys just might have way different values of the way of doing life. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's going to be a huge indicator for you whether that stays in a friendship zone or if that moves to relationship zone. But yeah.
Thank you. Wow. This one's related to, the 10 signs. What can be done when you're in an unhealthy relationship and you're good to move on, but the other person keeps insisting and making you guilty for wanting to break up, but the person doesn't seem to change? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this might sound really harsh, you guys, but we are not responsible for other people's reactions, right? And I say that if we are doing things in love, in grace, we are doing things kindly, we are doing what's best for us. How someone else responds is not our responsibility. That's on them, right? So the guilt that they're trying to put on you, that's for them to be responsible for. And so I think these boundaries are so important, which is a whole thing that we didn't get to. But we have to start to put boundaries in place, right? And it sounds like I will always care about you, right? You held a really special place in my life for this period of time. And if you can't stop texting me, right, I'm going to put this boundary. And if you can't stop, liking my posts, I'm going to put this boundary. If you can't stop, and so again, it's kind of putting boundaries up if a person consistently proves that they can't respect that. And again, that idea of that is their feelings to manage, and they're sad and upset, and we get that. And that is not your responsibility, if that makes sense.
Yeah, those healthy boundaries. I think that's really harder when you're younger, right? Especially if you haven't established those yet. It just takes time.
Well, yeah, and none of us likes someone being upset with us, right? That's never gonna feel good. And again, but that's for them to navigate, right? That's for them to figure out. And usually someone not liking us is because they're hurt and they're gonna heal from that. It's not gonna last forever. I think reminding everyone that like no emotion lasts forever. It doesn't mean it doesn't suck in the moment, but it doesn't last forever.
Yeah, folks, if you have any additional questions, feel free to drop them into the chat. We're
We want to do like one more.
Yeah, let's see. This is a little sensitive one. This person, she's 19, and they were asked out, but they've been asked out twice, but they feel very uncomfortable and extremely anxious, to the point of, you know, crying and feeling sick. So they're asking, you know, why do you think I react this way, and what can I do about it? It's like an early dating question.
Yeah. I mean, it's tricky. I mean, it sounds like there's some social anxiety there. My response would be, regardless, like, your body's telling you something, right? And so really what we'd want to do is try to figure out, like, what is my body telling me, right? Is it just like the nerves and excitements of going on a date? Is it maybe my intuition saying this isn't the right person to date? Is it some social anxiety in general, feeling like I'm not confident, I might embarrass myself, you know? So to notice that your body is trying to tell you something, and let's figure out what that is, right? Like, I wish I could say this is what it is for you. And I'm sorry that I can't, but you can, right? Or you and the support of someone else can, because again, I feel like we're not taught to listen to our bodies enough, and they really are information. And so if it's feeling that nerve-wracking for you, what is it? And if it's just excitement, right, then we can figure out, okay, how do I regulate myself? Because obviously something is dysregulating to your body, and we get to figure out tools to help you regulate it. So is that deep breaths? Do I need to do I need to go for a minute walk before I actually go on this date? What is it to help get us regulated? But before we can regulate, we really need to know what's the root of what's coming up for us.
Thank you. Okay, folks. Yeah, that was. Thank you for all those great questions, and thank you everyone for participating. And thank you, Rachel. That was such helpful information. I learned a lot, and especially for the young emerging adults, I think this is extremely valuable. So thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.